My name is Amber Wilson, and I am 27 years old. I never thought that being a supportive daughter would lead to the biggest betrayal of my life. When I woke up in the hospital after my life-threatening car accident, I was confused and in excruciating pain. The nurse avoided eye contact as she adjusted my forearm. "The police called your parents about the accident," she whispered. "They said, and I quote, 'we're cruising.' Good if that freeloader disappeared," and hung up. In that moment, my entire world collapsed. Before I tell you how I turned this heartbreak into the best revenge, drop a comment where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch. Trust me, what happened next will make your jaw drop. I grew up in what looked like a normal middle-class family in suburban Boston. Our house had the white picket fence, my father Timothy coached Little League, and my mother Rachel volunteered at school bake sales. From the outside, we were the perfect American family. But appearances can be deceiving. Behind closed doors, my parents operated with a simple philosophy: their needs always came first. When I was 8, they missed my piano recital because they wanted to attend a neighbor's barbecue. When I was 12, they forgot to pick me up after swim practice, leaving me sitting alone in the dark for 3 hours. They always had an excuse, but the pattern was clear. I was an afterthought. "Amber, don't be so sensitive," my mother would say whenever I expressed disappointment. "The world doesn't revolve around you." Despite their emotional neglect, I desperately craved their approval. I became the perfect daughter, throwing myself into academics and extracurriculars. By senior year, I was valedictorian with a full scholarship to Boston University. At my graduation, my father actually patted me on the back and said, "Not bad, kiddo." Those 3 words felt like winning the lottery. In college, I called home every Sunday, even though they rarely picked up. I sent them care packages during finals week, even though they never sent anything back. I was performing the role of devoted daughter, hoping that eventually they would play the part of loving parents. After graduation 5 years ago, I landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm. The salary was modest, $40,000 a year, barely enough to cover my student loan payments and the tiny studio apartment I rented in the city. But I was proud of my independence and excited about my future. Then came the call that would change everything. "Amber, your father lost his job," my mother announced without preamble. "And I need surgery for my gallbladder. The medical bills are piling up. We might lose the house." Without hesitation, I offered to move back home to help them get back on their feet. I packed up my little apartment and returned to my childhood bedroom, now converted into a storage space. I cleared out just enough room for a twin bed and a small dresser. "We'll need $800 a month for rent," my father informed me the day I moved in, plus utilities and groceries. I was shocked. $800 was nearly half my take-home pay. But I nodded and agreed, telling myself it was temporary. It wasn't. My temporary situation stretched from months into years. My father half-heartedly applied for jobs while spending most days watching television. My mother recovered from her surgery within weeks, but complained about phantom pains whenever household chores needed doing. Meanwhile, my financial burdens grew heavier. When the refrigerator broke, I paid for the replacement. When their car needed repairs, I covered the costs. When property taxes came due, guess who wrote the check? All while continuing to pay that exorbitant rent. "Amber, we need a new roof," my father announced over dinner one night, 3 years into this arrangement. "The contractor says it will cost $18,000. "Dad, I don't have that kind of money," I protested. "What else are you spending your money on?" my mother snapped. "It's not like you have a social life. And we've given you free housing all these years." Free housing? I was paying more than market rate rent for a bedroom filled with boxes. But I swallowed my retort and promised to figure something out. I ended up taking out a personal loan, adding to my already substantial debt. All the while, they criticized my life choices. My job was not impressive enough. My few friends were bad influences. My clothes were too cheap looking. Nothing I did was ever good enough. Even as I drained my bank account to keep them afloat. By my 27th birthday, I had given them over $70,000. My credit cards were maxed out. My savings were depleted. My retirement account had been cashed out, penalties be damned. And I was reaching my breaking point. I think I might look for my own place soon, I mentioned cautiously during dinner. 1 week before the accident. After everything we've done for you, my mother's voice rose to a familiar pitch. This is how you repay us? By abandoning us when we need you most? I've been here for 5 years, Mom. I've helped as much as I can. Typical millennial, my father scoffed. Selfish to the core. Your generation doesn't understand sacrifice. I went to bed that night and cried silently into my pillow, a grown woman reduced to a powerless child. But something had shifted inside me. I began researching apartments during lunch breaks. I started moving my most treasured possessions to a small storage unit. I was finally planning my escape. And then came the rainy Tuesday that would change everything, revealing just how little I truly meant to the people who were supposed to love me most. That Tuesday started like any other day. I woke up at 5:30, quietly got ready so as not to disturb my parents, and headed to the office for an early meeting. It was budget season, and as a recently promoted senior marketing coordinator, I had presentations to prepare. The rain started around noon, a gentle drizzle that gradually intensified throughout the day. By evening, it was a full-blown deluge. Sheets of water cascading from an angry black sky. Thunder cracked overhead as I packed up my laptop at 8:30 p.m. You sure you don't want to wait it out? Asked my coworker James as he peered out the window. I can't, I sighed. If I'm not home by 9:30, my parents will blow up my phone asking where their dinner is. The drive normally took 40 minutes. That night, with the rain reducing visibility to mere feet and traffic crawling along, I knew it would take longer. I called home. I'll be late. I told my mother. The weather's terrible. We're starving, she complained. Just be careful. We need the car tomorrow. Not be safe, Amber. Not, don't worry about us. Just a reminder that the car I paid for was actually theirs in their minds. I was on the highway, about 20 minutes from home, when it happened. A semi-truck in the next lane hydroplaned, sideswiping my small sedan and sending it spinning across 3 lanes of traffic. The world became a blur of headlights, screeching tires, and the sickening crunch of metal. My car rolled once, twice. 3 times before coming to rest upside down in a ditch. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Something had punctured my left side. My head throbbed where it had hit the window. My lower body was crushed beneath the collapsed dashboard. Through the shattered windshield, rain poured in, mixing with the blood trickling into my eyes. I don't know how long I hung there, suspended by my seatbelt, slipping in and out of consciousness. A face appeared at the window, a stranger with kind eyes. Help is coming, the woman assured me, rain plastering her hair to her face. I'm Sarah. I'm going to stay with you until the ambulance arrives. Sarah talked to me, keeping me awake, as the wail of sirens grew closer. I remember the firefighters using the jaws of life to cut me free from the wreckage. I remember the paramedics stabilizing my neck and lifting me onto a backboard. I remember the ambulance ride. The lights flashing, someone cutting away my clothes, another person inserting an 4. And then nothing. I woke up 3 days later in the intensive care unit of Massachusetts General Hospital. A doctor with gentle hands explained my injuries, for broken ribs, a punctured lung, a fractured pelvis, a severe concussion, and numerous lacerations requiring over 60 stitches. You're very lucky to be alive, he told me. The first 48 hours were touch and go. Touch and go. I had nearly died, and I was alone. No flowers by my bedside. No concerned family members keeping vigil. Just machines beeping and the antiseptic smell of hospital cleaning products. Later that day, a police officer came to discuss the accident. Officer Rivera was professional but kind, explaining that the truck driver had been cited for reckless driving. She asked for emergency contact information and, without thinking, I gave her my parents' number. They haven't been in, she asked, surprised. They might not know yet, I offered weakly. Officer Rivera's expression softened. I'll make sure they're notified immediately. That evening, as a nurse named Karen was checking my vitals, I asked the question that had been nagging at me. Has anyone called for me? Any family? Karen's hands stilled on the blood pressure cuff. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The police called your emergency contacts yesterday, she said quietly. Your parents, I believe. And? Karen hesitated. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but they said we're cruising. Good if that freeloader disappeared and hung up. I'm so sorry. The monitor beside me registered my increased heart rate as the truth crashed down. Freeloader. After everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed, they saw me as a burden. A freeloader. Tears slid down my face as Karen awkwardly patted my hand. Is there anyone else we can call for you? A friend? Another relative? I shook my head. Years of working overtime and supporting my parents had left little room for building my own support network. I had acquaintances at work, but no one close enough to call in this situation. The next morning, a hospital social worker named Marissa came to see me. Short and energetic with a no-nonsense attitude, she helped me understand my situation. Your health insurance will cover most of the hospital stay, but there will be out-of-pocket expenses, she explained. And you're looking at several months of recovery and rehabilitation. Do you have short-term disability through your employer? I nodded, grateful that I had at least signed up for that benefit. Good. That will provide some income while you recover. Now, about your living situation. Will you be able to return to your current residence? Do you have someone who can help with your care? I took a deep breath, wincing at the pain in my ribs, and told her everything. About my parents, the financial drain, their callous response to my accident. By the end, Marissa was shaking her head in disbelief. Amber, what they've been doing to you is financial abuse, she said firmly. And their response to your accident is emotional abandonment. You deserve better, and I'm going to help you find it. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, I felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe this devastating accident was actually my opportunity to break free from the toxic cycle of obligation and exploitation. Maybe, just maybe, I could build a new life from the wreckage. What I didn't know then was that my parents' betrayal went far deeper than I ever imagined, and that the road to freedom would require confronting painful truths I had spent a lifetime trying to ignore. The weeks following my accident were the hardest of my life. Physical pain became my constant companion, from the stabbing sensation in my ribs with each breath to the throbbing ache in my pelvis whenever I shifted position. The simplest tasks became monumental challenges. Rolling onto my side, sitting up, using the bathroom. Each movement was an exercise in endurance. My first physical therapy session was humiliating. Jessica, my therapist, was a tall, athletic woman with a runner's build and seemingly infinite patience. Today, we're just going to focus on getting you sitting up unassisted, she explained. Small goals, big victories. It took 45 minutes of sweating, trembling effort for me to manage just that. By the end, I was exhausted and demoralized. I used to run 3 miles every morning, I told Jessica, fighting back tears. Now I can't even sit up without help. And you will run again, she assured me. Recovery isn't linear, but it is possible. I've seen patients with injuries worse than yours go on to climb mountains. As my body slowly began to heal, my financial anxiety grew. Hospital bills piled up. Rent on my apartment back at my parents' house was going unpaid. I worried about losing my job, despite my boss Martin's reassurances. Your position is waiting for you when you're ready, he told me during a phone call. Just focus on getting better. What truly surprised me was the response from my coworkers. People I had barely spoken to beyond morning pleasantries organized a meal train, ensuring I had home-cooked food delivered to the hospital daily. James from accounting set up a GoFundMe that raised $8,000 toward my medical expenses. The marketing team sent a giant care package with books, magazines, and fuzzy socks. Meanwhile, not a word from my parents. No calls. No texts. No visits. It was as if I had ceased to exist for them the moment I stopped being useful. When I was released from the hospital after 3 weeks, the question of where I would go became urgent. I couldn't return to my parents' house, both physically and emotionally. The stairs to my bedroom would be impossible to navigate with my injuries. And the thought of facing the people who had so callously dismissed me made me physically ill. You could stay with me temporarily, Jessica offered after our therapy session. I have a spare bedroom on the first floor. I hesitated, uncomfortable with accepting such generosity from someone who was essentially a stranger. But Jessica was insistent. I live alone in a house that's too big for me, she explained. Having someone there would actually be nice. Plus, I can help with your recovery. Think of it as physical therapy homework. And so I moved into Jessica's cozy Cape Cod-style house in a quiet neighborhood of Somerville. What was meant to be a temporary arrangement of a few weeks gradually evolved as Jessica and I developed a genuine friendship. We discovered a shared love of true crime podcasts, spicy Thai food, and terrible reality TV shows. For the first time in my adult life, I experienced what it felt like to live in a home without walking on eggshells. You laugh in your sleep sometimes, Jessica told me one morning over coffee. Did you know that? I shook my head, surprised. I didn't think I ever really relaxed enough to laugh, even asleep. Well, you do now. I think your body knows you're safe here. Safe. What a foreign concept that had been for so long. As weeks turned into months, my recovery progressed. I graduated from a wheelchair to a walker, then to crutches, and finally to walking unassisted, though with a noticeable limp. I began working remotely part-time, grateful for the income and mental stimulation. It was during this period of rebuilding that I made a disturbing discovery. I had asked a coworker to retrieve some personal items from my desk, including my spare house key, so I could ask someone to collect my remaining belongings from my parents' home. Going through my desk drawer, I found an unopened credit card statement that had been delivered to my work address. Confused, I opened it. It was for a credit card I didn't recognize, with a balance of nearly $20,000. The purchases were definitely not mine. Golf clubs, a cruise booking, designer clothing from stores I could never afford. With growing horror, I called the credit card company. Yes, the card was in my name. Yes, it had been opened 3 years ago. The address on file? My parents' house. That one discovery led me down a rabbit hole of financial investigation. With Jessica's help, I requested copies of my credit reports, contacted banks, and pieced together a shocking truth. My parents had been systematically stealing my identity for years. There were 3 credit cards, a personal loan, and even a second mortgage on their house, all in my name. All told, they had racked up over $87,000 of debt under my social security number. The statements had all been going to their address, neatly explaining why they had been so insistent that I continue living with them. They needed to intercept the mail. They didn't see me as their daughter, I told Jessica one night, staring at the pile of fraudulent statements spread across her dining table. They saw me as their personal ATM and their identity theft victim. What are you going to do? She asked. It was a question I wrestled with for days. These were my parents, the people who had raised me. Could I really take legal action against them? But they had stolen from me, betrayed me, and left me to suffer alone when I needed them most. The answer became clearer with each passing day. Before I could make a final decision, however, they made the first move, revealing just how little they had changed and inadvertently giving me the push I needed to finally break free. 2 months after my accident, I was sitting in Jessica's sunny kitchen, working on my laptop when my phone rang. The screen displayed Mom with a photo of Rachel from Happier Times. My hand trembled as I debated whether to answer. Jessica, loading the dishwasher nearby, raised an eyebrow. You don't have to talk to them, she reminded me. But some deeply ingrained sense of obligation made me swipe to accept the call. Hello? My voice sounded stronger than I felt. Amber, finally, my mother's voice was sharp with irritation. Why haven't you been answering our calls? The truth was that this was the first time they had called since my accident, but I didn't point that out. I've been recovering from my accident. A beat of silence. Then, astonishingly, what accident? Either she was gaslighting me, or they had so completely dismissed the police notification that they had genuinely forgotten about it. Neither option was comforting. The car accident, I said slowly. 2 months ago. I nearly died. The police called you. Oh, that, my mother said dismissively. We thought they were exaggerating. You know how dramatic these officials can be. I gripped the phone tighter, knuckles turning white. Jessica had stopped loading dishes and was watching me with concern. What do you need, Mom? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. The bank keeps calling about some loan payment. And the credit card companies won't stop harassing us. Since you're the one who set all this up, you need to deal with it. My blood ran cold. They weren't calling to check on me. They weren't calling to apologize. They were calling because their financial fraud was catching up to them. And they expected me to fix it. I didn't set up any loans or credit cards, I said carefully. Don't be ridiculous, Amber. Of course you did. You said it was to help us out during tough times. The least you could do is keep making the payments. The audacity was breathtaking. They had stolen my identity, racked up massive debt in my name. And now were trying to convince me that it had been my idea all along. Where have you been anyway? My father's voice suddenly cut in, indicating I was on speakerphone. The rent is 2 months late. I've been in the hospital. And then recovering at a friend's house. From the life-threatening accident you couldn't be bothered to visit me for. Don't be so dramatic, my mother scoffed. You always exaggerate. Besides, we were on that cruise. The one you helped pay for. She said this last part pointedly, as if reminding me of some generous gift I had given them, rather than a purchase they had fraudulently made in my name. I didn't pay for any cruise, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. Well, technically it was the credit card, my father interjected, but it's all the same thing. No, it's not the same thing, I snapped. Those credit cards are in my name, but I didn't open them. You did. That's identity theft. That's fraud. A long silence followed this accusation. When my mother spoke again, her voice had shifted to the wounded, martyred tone I knew so well. After everything we've done for you, after raising you, putting a roof over your head, sacrificing our dreams so you could have opportunities, this is how you repay us? By accusing us of crimes. You didn't put a roof over my head. I paid for that roof. I paid for everything while you took advantage of me for years. And when I nearly died, you couldn't even be bothered to visit me in the hospital. Oh, here we go with the guilt trips. My father groaned. Look, we don't have time for your dramatics. Just take care of these bills like you promised, and we can all move on. Something inside me snapped. Years of suppressed anger, resentment, and hurt came flooding out. I'm not paying another cent, I said, my voice deadly calm. In fact, I'll be reporting the identity theft to the police. You committed fraud. And you're going to face the consequences. You ungrateful little, my father started, but I cut him off. The bank asked about the loan payments. I said, tell them to ask the freeloader. And I hung up. For several minutes, I sat motionless, staring at the phone as it lit up with repeated calls from my parents. Jessica sat down beside me and gently took my trembling hands in hers. You did it, she said quietly. You stood up to them. The enormity of what had just happened crashed over me. I had finally confronted my parents. I had stopped being their victim. And while it felt empowering, it also felt like losing them all over again. The tears came then, great heaving sobs that made my still healing ribs ache. Jessica held me through it. This friend who had shown me more genuine care in 2 months than my parents had in 27 years. When the storm of emotion finally passed, I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath. I need to call a lawyer, I said. Jessica nodded. I have a friend from college, Derek Matthews. He specializes in identity theft cases. I'll give him a call. The next day, Derek came to Jessica's house. A serious man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he listened without judgment as I explained my situation. The fraudulent accounts. The years of financial exploitation. The abandonment after my accident. The gaslighting during our recent phone call. What they've done is criminal, he confirmed. Identity theft. Financial fraud, exploitation. You have a very strong case. They're my parents, I said quietly. Is there any way to resolve this without pressing charges? Derek looked at me with compassion. Amber, I understand this is difficult. But what they've done has seriously damaged your credit, potentially affecting your ability to rent apartments. buy a car, or even get certain jobs for years to come. Not to mention the financial burden of $87,000 of debt that isn't yours. He paused, letting that sink in. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for people who harm us is to make them face consequences. Without accountability, there's rarely change. I nodded slowly, knowing he was right but still struggling with the decision. What's the first step? We file a police report documenting the identity theft. Then we contact each creditor with the report number and formal fraud affidavits. And we prepare for the possibility that your parents may face criminal charges. It was the hardest decision I had ever made. But as I signed the police report the following day, I knew it was also the right one. Not just for my financial future, but for my emotional freedom. What I didn't anticipate was how ugly things would get before they got better, or how this confrontation would ultimately lead to the family I truly deserved. The police report was just the beginning. Once the formal investigation into my parents' fraud began, things escalated quickly. Detective Morales, a veteran financial crimes investigator, called me 3 days after I filed the report. "Ms. Wilson, we've gathered substantial evidence confirming your allegations," she informed me. "Credit applications with forged signatures. Security camera footage of your parents using credit cards in your name. Bank records showing transfers from accounts they opened in your name to their personal accounts." I sat on Jessica's couch, phone pressed to my ear, feeling simultaneously vindicated and sick to my stomach. "What happens now?" I asked. "We'll be presenting the case to the district attorney. Given the amount involved, they're looking at felony charges. Your parents will be served with papers in the next few days." I thanked her and hung up, overcome with conflicting emotions. Part of me felt relief that justice was being served. Another part mourned the final death of any hope for a normal parent-child relationship. The fallout came swiftly. My phone exploded with messages from extended family members I hadn't heard from in years. Aunt Cynthia called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. Uncle Robert texted that no decent person would send their own parents to jail. Cousins I barely remembered from childhood posted vague references to family traitors on social media. "They're calling me the villain," I told Jessica one evening, scrolling through the barrage of messages. "They have no idea what really happened." "That's because they're only hearing your parents' version," Jessica pointed out. "People believe what they want to believe, especially when it comes to family." She was right. My parents had crafted a narrative that painted them as victims of an ungrateful daughter. According to them, they had lovingly supported me through adulthood, and I was repaying their generosity by fabricating criminal accusations. The reality, of course, was completely different. Derek helped me compile a comprehensive record of my financial support to my parents: rent payments, groceries, utilities, car repairs, home improvements, and more. The total came to over $140,000 over 5 years, not including the fraudulent accounts they had opened in my name. "This is your ammunition," Derek said, handing me the bound report. "When people accuse you of being ungrateful, show them exactly what you've been grateful for." Not everyone in my family believed my parents' lies. To my surprise, my mother's sister, Aunt Barbara, reached out with a very different message. "I've always known who your parents really are," she told me during a long phone call. "Why do you think we haven't spoken in 20 years? They borrowed $40,000 from me and never paid it back. Then they told everyone I had tried to steal from them." Barbara became an unexpected ally, offering both emotional support and additional evidence of my parents' history of financial exploitation. She had distanced herself from the family decades ago, building a peaceful life in Vermont with her husband. Now she welcomed me into that life as the niece she had lost touch with. "Family isn't just about blood," she told me. "It's about who treats you like you matter." For weeks after filing the police report, I faced my parents for the first time since the accident. Our lawyers had arranged a mediation session, a last attempt to resolve the situation before proceeding to criminal charges. Derek advised against it, concerned about the emotional impact, but I insisted. Some part of me still hoped for acknowledgement, if not an apology. The community center conference room felt too small as soon as my parents walked in. My mother looked thinner than I remembered. her face tight with anger. My father's usual bluster seemed diminished, though his eyes still flashed with indignation when they met mine. Their lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, spoke first. My clients are willing to acknowledge that there may have been some misunderstandings regarding financial arrangements. They're prepared to take responsibility for the credit accounts and begin making payments. Derek scoffed. Misunderstandings? They committed felony identity theft and fraud. And given their financial situation, we all know they can't make meaningful payments on $87,000 of debt. Perhaps their daughter, who clearly has resources for private attorneys, could assist with a payment plan, the lawyer suggested smoothly. In the interest of family harmony, I had remained silent until that point. But this pushed me over the edge. Family harmony, I repeated incredulously. They left me alone in the hospital after a near-fatal accident. They called me a freeloader after I supported them for years. What family are you referring to exactly? My mother's face contorted. Always so dramatic. It was a car accident, not a terminal illness. And we were on a cruise we couldn't cancel. A cruise purchased with a fraudulent credit card in my name, I pointed out. You offered to help with our expenses. My father interjected. Help with expenses is not the same as stealing my identity and running up massive debt, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. I paid your bills. I supported you financially for years. I put my life on hold to take care of you both. And in return, you took advantage of me at every turn. We gave you life, my mother hissed. We raised you. You owed us. Those 3 words crystallized everything that was wrong with our relationship. You owed us. Not we love you or we care about you. Just an entitlement to whatever they could extract from me. Parents choose to have children, I said quietly. Children don't choose to be born. The obligation goes one way, not the other. Good parents support their children and celebrate their independence. They don't view them as investments to cash in later. Philosophical debates aside, Derek interjected. We need a concrete resolution. My client is willing to drop potential criminal charges under the following conditions: full acknowledgement of the fraud, transfer of all fraudulent debts to your names, a legally binding agreement to never contact Ms. Wilson again, and financial restitution of $20,000 for the damage to her credit and the emotional distress caused. My father's face turned purple. $20,000? That's extortion. It's actually quite generous, Derek replied calmly. The alternative is criminal prosecution and a civil lawsuit that would likely result in a much larger judgment. The mediation ultimately failed. My parents refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing, insisting that I had either authorized the accounts or was making false accusations for financial gain. Their lawyer, sensing a losing battle, advised them to consider the settlement, but they were too entrenched in their own narrative. As they stormed out, my mother turned to deliver a final blow. No real daughter would do this to her parents. You're dead to us. I sat very still, absorbing the irony of her disowning me after I had finally stood up for myself. I've been dead to you for a long time, I replied. The difference is that now I know it. With mediation failed, the case proceeded to court. My parents were formally charged with identity theft, fraud, and financial exploitation. The evidence was overwhelming. Credit applications with forged signatures. Security footage of them using my credit cards. Bank records showing systematic theft. And perhaps most damning, text messages between them discussing how to hide statements from me. The day of the preliminary hearing, I sat in the courtroom, stomach in knots, as my parents pleaded not guilty despite the mountain of evidence. The judge, a stern woman with penetrating eyes, set a trial date and denied their request for the charges to be dismissed. As painful as the legal process was, it was also strangely liberating. Each step forced me to confront the reality of who my parents were, stripping away the illusions I had maintained for so long. And with that clarity came the freedom to build something new from the ashes of what I had lost. The months leading up to the trial were a paradoxical mix of stress and healing. My physical recovery progressed steadily. The limp from my pelvic fracture became barely noticeable. The pain in my ribs subsided to an occasional twinge. The angry red scars began to fade to silver. My body was mending itself, even as my family relationships lay in ruins. Jessica's spare bedroom had become truly mine, filled with my books, clothes, and the few treasured possessions I had managed to retrieve from my parents' house with the help of a police escort. What had begun as a temporary arrangement evolved into a more permanent roommate situation, with both of us enjoying the companionship and shared expenses. I've lived alone so long I forgot how nice it is to have someone to talk to at the end of the day, Jessica admitted one evening as we tackled a jigsaw puzzle together. Work became another source of stability. My boss Martin not only held my position but offered me a promotion to marketing manager upon my return to the office. The way you've handled adversity shows exactly the kind of resilience and problem-solving we value, he told me during my performance review. Plus, the campaign you developed remotely brought in 3 major clients. The salary increase from the promotion was significant, allowing me to begin addressing the financial damage the accident and my parents' fraud had caused. With Derek's help, I had successfully disputed the fraudulent accounts, but my credit score had taken a massive hit. Rebuilding would take time. As the trial date approached, my parents made one last desperate attempt to avoid consequences. Their lawyer called Derek with a settlement offer. They would acknowledge the fraud and agree to a payment plan in exchange for dropping the criminal charges. What do you think? Derek asked me after relaying the offer. I considered it carefully. Would they face any real consequences? They'd have a civil judgment against them and a restraining order, but no criminal record. And what are the chances they'll actually make the payments? Derek grimaced. Based on their financial situation and past behavior, slim to none. We'd likely have to pursue wage garnishment or property liens, which is a whole other legal battle. Then no, I decided. This isn't about money anymore. It's about accountability. They need to face real consequences for once in their lives. The trial itself was mercifully brief. The evidence was too overwhelming for a lengthy proceeding. My testimony took less than 2 hours, during which I calmly recounted the years of financial exploitation, the discovery of the fraud, and their callous response to my accident. My parents' testimony was a study in deflection and denial. They claimed I had authorized the accounts. They insisted I had volunteered to support them financially. They portrayed themselves as loving parents blindsided by an ungrateful daughter's accusations. But the facts spoke for themselves. Bank records, credit applications with forged signatures, security footage, text messages between them discussing how to hide bills from me, and perhaps most damning, the police record of their response when notified of my accident. We're cruising. Good if that freeloader disappeared. After just 3 days of testimony, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced my parents to 2 years of probation, mandatory financial counseling, restitution of the full fraudulent amount plus damages, and a permanent restraining order prohibiting them from contacting me. As the gavel fell, finalizing the judgment, I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt a profound sadness mixed with relief. Not for the relationship I was losing, but for the years I had wasted trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. My parents left the courtroom without looking at me, shoulders hunched, their carefully constructed facade of respectability shattered. I watched them go, these strangers who had given me life but never real love, and felt the last chains of obligation finally break. Outside the courthouse, under a crisp autumn sky, Jessica hugged me. How do you feel? Like I can finally start living for myself, I replied honestly. The aftermath of the trial brought unexpected developments. Several relatives who had initially condemned me reached out after learning the full story, offering belated support and apologies. I accepted graciously but maintained healthy boundaries, recognizing that true relationships couldn't be built on obligation alone. With the legal battle behind me, I focused on rebuilding my finances. The court had awarded me substantial damages beyond the fraudulent amounts, which helped address my medical bills and legal fees. My improved salary allowed me to begin saving again. Slowly, my credit score began to climb from the devastated sub-500 range. 3 months after the trial, Jessica and I found a two-bedroom apartment closer to my office, with wide doorways and no stairs, accommodating the occasional mobility issues I still experienced from my injuries. We signed the lease together, my first housing contract that wasn't tainted by exploitation or obligation. To new beginnings, Jessica toasted the night we moved in, clinking her glass of sparkling cider against mine. And to chosen family, I added. That concept, chosen family, became central to my healing journey. Without the drain of supporting my parents financially and emotionally, I had space to nurture genuine connections. I joined a support group for survivors of family financial abuse, finding community among others with similar experiences. I reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with during the years of isolation. I built a network of people who valued me for myself, not for what I could provide. Professionally, I thrived in my new role, bringing a newfound confidence to my work. The promotion came with team management responsibilities, and I found I had a talent for leadership built on respect rather than obligation. My team's campaigns won industry recognition, and I was invited to speak at marketing conferences about innovative strategies. The physical scars from my accident faded, but I chose not to hide them. The thin silver line along my collarbone, the puckered mark on my forearm, the barely visible track along my hairline, they were testaments to survival, to a life nearly lost and ultimately reclaimed. 1 year after the accident, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, studying the woman I had become. Stronger, yes, but also softer in the ways that mattered. More willing to enforce boundaries, but also more open to genuine connection. Wiser about the darker sides of human nature, but still choosing to believe in goodness. I no longer defined myself as a dutiful daughter or a victim of exploitation. I was simply Amber, creating a life on my own terms, building the family I deserved rather than trying to fix the one I had been born into. And for the first time in my adult life, I was truly, completely free. 1 year and 3 months after the accident that changed everything, I stood at the window of my office, watching snow drift lazily past the glass. My physical therapy had officially ended 2 weeks earlier, with Jessica declaring me as good as new, maybe even better. The limp was gone. The pain had faded to occasional twinges during weather changes. I had even started running again, managing 2 miles without stopping. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Dinner with Aunt Barbara and Uncle Jim still on for 7. I smiled as I replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Barbara and her husband had become regular fixtures in my life, providing the warm, supportive family connection I had always craved. They lived 2 hours away in Vermont, but made the drive at least once a month for dinner, and I had spent Thanksgiving at their cozy farmhouse, learning to make Barbara's famous apple pie. Amber, do you have a minute? Martin knocked on my office door, interrupting my thoughts. Of course, I gestured to the chair across from my desk. I wanted to discuss the victim support initiative you proposed, he said, sliding a folder across to me. The board approved it unanimously. They've allocated $50,000 as seed funding. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was the formal approval for a project I had pitched 3 months earlier. A nonprofit foundation that would provide financial education and legal assistance to victims of family financial abuse. The company would serve as the primary corporate sponsor, with a matching donation program for employees. This is incredible, I breathed. Thank you for championing it. Martin shook his head. No need to thank me. Your presentation sold it. Your personal experience gives the initiative authenticity, and your marketing expertise ensures it will reach the people who need it most. As he left, I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by how much had changed. A year ago, I had been physically broken, financially devastated, and emotionally shattered. Now I was helping others escape similar situations while building a career I was proud of. The journey had not been easy. Therapy had become an essential part of my healing process, helping me navigate the complex grief of losing my family of origin while building my chosen family. Dr. Patel, my therapist, had guided me through the stages of anger, mourning, acceptance, and finally, growth. Family trauma creates deep grooves in our psyche, she had explained during one session. We can't erase those grooves, but we can create new, healthier patterns alongside them. Those new patterns included setting firm boundaries, recognizing manipulation tactics, and learning to receive love without feeling obligated to earn it. Most importantly, I had learned to trust my own perceptions rather than allowing others to define my reality. After work, I met Jessica at our favorite coffee shop, where we had started a bi-weekly support group for survivors of family financial abuse. What began as an informal gathering of 4 people had grown to more than 20 regular attendees, from college students being exploited by parents to seniors whose adult children had drained their retirement accounts. My son tried to make me co-sign another loan yesterday, shared Eleanor, a gentle woman in her 70s. I actually said no this time, just like we practiced. The group erupted in applause, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest. These small victories were what healing looked like, reclaiming personal power one boundary at a time. After the meeting, as Jessica and I walked home through the snow, she nudged my shoulder. "You've built something important here, you know. These people were suffering in silence before. We built it together," I corrected her. "I wouldn't be here without you." It was true. Jessica had evolved from physical therapist to roommate to best friend to the sister I had never had. Her no-nonsense compassion had been my anchor through the darkest days of recovery and legal battles. At home, as we prepared dinner for Barbara and Jim's visit, my phone chimed with an unfamiliar email notification. The subject line made my heart skip. "From your father." I stood frozen, wooden spoon dripping sauce onto the counter. Jessica noticed my expression and came to read over my shoulder. "You don't have to open it," she reminded me gently. But I did. With trembling fingers, I tapped the screen. "Amber, I know I have no right to contact you. The restraining order is still in effect, and I'm sending this through my counselor with the court's permission as part of my rehabilitation program. I won't ask for forgiveness. What your mother and I did to you is unforgivable. The financial exploitation, the emotional manipulation, the abandonment when you needed us most. There is no excuse. The counseling program has forced me to confront the harsh truth about myself and my behavior. I was a terrible father who viewed his child as a resource rather than a person deserving of love and respect. Your mother and I have separated. She refuses to acknowledge any wrongdoing. But I can no longer live in denial. The restitution payments will continue as ordered by the court, regardless of this communication. I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that one of the people who hurt you now understands the damage he caused. Timothy Wilson." I set the phone down slowly, emotions swirling. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, something I had never expected to receive. "Are you okay?" Jessica asked quietly. I considered the question carefully. "Yes," I said finally. This doesn't change anything, but it helps to know that he at least recognizes what they did. "Do you want to respond?" I shook my head. "Not now. Maybe someday, but I'm not ready." And that's okay. That evening, surrounded by the chosen family I had built, I shared the email and my decision not to respond yet. Barbara nodded approvingly. "Healing happens on your timeline, not anyone else's," she said, squeezing my hand. "You get to decide what relationship, if any, you want with your parents going forward." Over dessert, Jim raised his glass in a toast. "To Amber, who taught us all that real family is built on respect and love, not obligation and blood." The months that followed brought more growth and unexpected joys. The Financial Support Foundation launched successfully, helping dozens of victims in its first quarter. I was invited to speak at conferences about financial abuse within families, breaking the silence around a rarely discussed form of exploitation. My personal life blossomed as well. Through a foundation event, I met Daniel, a kind financial advisor who specialized in helping abuse survivors rebuild their credit. Our shared passion for empowering others led to friendship, which gradually evolved into something deeper. Unlike previous relationships where I had diminished myself to please a partner, with Daniel I felt seen and valued exactly as I was. "What I admire most about you," he told me one evening as we walked along the river, "is your resilience. You transformed your pain into purpose. As the second anniversary of my accident approached, I decided to reclaim the day by giving it new meaning. I organized a fundraising run for the foundation, with participants pledging donations for each mile completed. To my amazement, over 300 people registered, including coworkers, support group members, and even some of the medical professionals who had treated me. The morning of the run dawned clear and cool. Standing at the starting line, wearing bib number 1, I looked out at the crowd of supporters. Jessica and Daniel flanked me, with Barbara and Jim holding a banner for the foundation. Martin and half the marketing department wore matching t-shirts with the foundation logo. As the starting horn sounded and we began to move forward, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. The accident that had nearly killed me had ultimately freed me, breaking the chains of toxic obligation and opening the door to authentic connection. Life would never be perfect. I still had occasional nightmares about the accident. Certain financial discussions still triggered anxiety. The complicated grief of family estrangement would always be part of my story. But these challenges no longer define me. I had learned that family is defined by actions, not blood. That boundaries are an expression of self-respect, not selfishness. That helping others should come from genuine care, not exploitation. And, perhaps most importantly, that I deserved to be loved not for what I could provide, but simply for who I was. 3 miles into the run, as I crested a hill overlooking the city, I paused for a moment, breathing deeply. Behind me stretched the path I had traveled, marked by pain and betrayal. Before me lay a future I was building on my own terms, surrounded by people who truly cared. I had lost my family of origin, but in the process, I had found my true home. Not in a physical place or blood relations, but in the community of genuine love I had built around me. What about you? Have you ever had to redefine what family means in your life? Did you ever have to set difficult boundaries with loved ones to protect yourself? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey of breaking free from toxic relationships resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Thank you for being part of my healing journey, and I wish you strength and courage in yours.